Good morning, Long Island. Welcome to CMM Live, where we are helping Long Island thrive. My name is Joe Campolo. I'm your host this beautiful Tuesday morning, May 15th. It's a gorgeous day outside, and today we're going to do a really important show for Long Island, and that is we're going to start talking about the impact of the not-for-profit sector here on Long Island. I mean, as of today, just so our viewers know, there are between 5,000 and 6,000 not-for-profits on Long Island. It affects billions and billions of dollars of the Long Island economy. So we are very lucky to have really two preeminent not-for-profit leaders join us this morning. Our first guest is John Miller. John is the CEO of the Guide Dog Foundation in Smithtown. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. John and I've served on some of John's boards. We met through the HIA when you were a recipient of the Business Achievement Award for your work. And I have to tell you folks that anybody who knows John knows what a tremendous organizational leader he is. He gives such impact to the organizations he's part of. And so John, welcome and good morning.
Well, thank you.
You
Glad
know,
to be here.
my first question to you is a question you and I have had discussions on over cocktails, and that is, you're such a talented guy, you're such a talented leader. You know, why the not-for-profit sector? You know, what drove you there, and what do you find there?
Well, I can tell you, having worked with folks like you, Joe, on our board, and the impact in the organizations that I've been lucky to be part of. I go back to really my first real nonprofit experience, which was at the Food Bank for New York City, and if we didn't do a good job, people didn't eat. So we had a lot of pressure on us to raise the funds that were needed to get the food and get food donations, but also do the distribution end of that. And you saw the impact, and people were motivated to do a good job because the stakes were very high. And I've been fortunate in my career. I started in local government in the town of Babylon here on Long Island, and from there through several stops with the food bank and ultimately the Red Cross, who I worked with very closely as chief of staff of the food bank. Superstorm Sandy, when that hit Long Island, was really just an impactful, high volume, high impact, but high need event. Meaning that we had to work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for almost 6.5, 7 months to provide housing, shelter, medication, mental health needs for people who were in their worst times. And really, to answer your question, it's about providing that impact and making sure that people have what they need. And it's really not about income disparity or whatever issues may be out there. Now with the Guide Dog Foundation and America's VetDogs, we work very closely with people who are vision impaired, veterans who've served and seen some of the most gruesome things you could imagine, and need a little support to make their lives a little more whole and get through their day. So it's all about the impact.
Yeah, so how do businesses, so one of the things I love about Long Island is we're a very philanthropic community. People realize that in order to get, you have to give, and you have to give back to the community, right? But with so many not-for-profits that are out there, right? How does the business community ascertain the ones that are making an impact, and the ones that just aren't, the ones that are started? A lot of times, a lot of criticism I hear is, not-for-profits will be started just to create a salary for a CEO somewhere, So help the business community understand when looking at them, sure, what they should be looking for.
Yeah, there are two major things I would say to that. Number one is the leadership. Do they have a reputable leader who can articulate a vision and really work, to demonstrate impact? Number two is there are rating agencies out there. So the Better Business Bureau, Charity Navigator, GuideStar, are all things or all resources for the business community to look at. And I found with my experience, particularly here on Long Island, it's about having relationships and making sure that corporate engagement and volunteer opportunities exist for employees and volunteer groups, so that they could take really hold and get their hands dirty and work with us in the trenches to get the services we get out there to the field.
Yeah, and I have to tell you folks that leadership is critical when you're looking at not-for-profits. As I mentioned, I've served on several of John's boards, the American Red Cross here on Long Island, and the Cerini Association of America, which was a national board, and the leadership was critical. The turnaround that you were able to accomplish at Tourette was Amazing. So what are you hoping to accomplish now at the Guide Dog Foundation and America's VetDogs? What are you hoping to accomplish there?
We want to impact as many people across the country and around the world that need our services. We have a 10-acre campus based here in Smithtown. We have dogs being raised in homes all across the country. We're providing great service out there, but we're not able to meet all of the need. We have a wait list that is there. We need to continue to grow the organization so we could get through our wait list and even deliver more services to the veterans and to the vision impaired community. We have a very, very top-notch program. We're duly accredited throughout the world. We're one of the first in the country to be duly accredited. We have a campus on Smithtown where we bring individuals from really around the world to get paired with their dogs, whether it's on the guide dog side or the vet dog side. And the dogs really are trained to provide custom type services for the particular needs of whether it be the person who's vision impaired or the veteran who's in need. And it's about being able to make a bigger impact.
So the Guide Dog Foundation is very well known, and we're going to talk a little bit about that more. But America VetDogs, that was established like in '03, right?
Right.
And so tell us why was there a need for a separate organization, and what's sort of the mission of that sister organization?
So the need really arose out of the war on terror, and we've the organization saw many people coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan and across the world, and had different types of needs. Large contingent of what we do at VetDogs is to serve the PTSD community. But not only the PTSD community, we have people on our board who have lost limbs, who are deaf, or had traumatic brain injuries with the service. And the numbers were so great that the organization decided to jump into this field with 2 feet. And really, we've become one of the national leaders in the service dog industry. Right now, we have that dual accreditation I talked about earlier, but also we have a signature partnership with NBC as well, where we're raising a guide dog right now live on the Today Show every day, as well as on the local NBC stations in Atlanta, Baltimore, Boston, and LA, really to drive awareness, to help raise money, and to highlight some of the good work that we're doing.
So the vet dogs, what sort of training do the dogs undertake, right? Because I mean, a good golden lab, a very loyal dog to begin with,
Sure.
What is the specific need in training that they do?
So it's very different, training a guide dog and a vet dog. So guide dogs are more traditional services that you see, and we out here on Long Island, we're on the railroad, we're in Patchogue, in the downtown areas, really training. Doing blindfold walks, to help the dogs get where they need to be. But on the vet dog side, it could be, the veteran, needs nightmare interruption, and the dogs are trained to either pull, the blanket, or to point and poke on the leg, to wake you up if it senses you're having a nightmare. They turn the lights on. They could retrieve, valuables. So if you left your cell phone, on a table, the dog is trained to retrieve that. They could retrieve something as little as a credit card up to something 5 pounds in weight. And depending on the actual needs, bracing for a service member who may have lost a limb and may have some trouble with balance, the dogs are taught to be a brace and to walk up and down stairs, and just getting up and down off a couch or a chair.
Right. So the lawyer in me says, some risk in making sure that you have the right dogs, making sure that you have the right candidates, making sure people aren't abusing the dogs. What's that process like? How do you select the dogs?
Sure.
And then how do you screen recipients?
Sure. So the dogs are all bred, in Smithtown, right on our campus, and we have a lot of science behind the breeding, to raise dogs with traits that we hope would be successful both on the guide dog and the vet dog side. Equally as important is the vetting process, for both the organizations for candidates who are coming in. And it's not just you could the next dog who's up and ready and the next veteran on the list. There's a real very high touch matching process that we go through to ensure that the dog will have the best chance to succeed, based on the personality of the potential handler, and vice versa. And we do personality, typing, so to speak. And then when the dogs are ready, and we're ready to get the veterans or the vision impaired person into the facility, we work on a 2-week basis. They come to our campus, stay on the campus for a full 2 weeks, and we teach them and help them bond, whether it's through their training, through feeding them, through walking them, and all the process that undertaken in that 2 weeks.
So after the 2 weeks, then I guess the candidate goes home with the matched dog,
Right.
right? And then is there follow-up? Is there any sort of
Yeah, so we have, once you leave the campus, that's not it. We have, certain checkpoints, that we work with, to make sure, the dog's being taken care of from a medical standpoint, so that everybody's out in the field has to at least go to the veterinarian once a year. We provide certain amount of vaccination and food and equipment for the dogs. But there's a clear contract between the organization and the handler, and to make sure that that care happens. But more importantly, we're out there. We have different zones throughout the country that really our field reps work. If the dog and the handler of the team need to be retrained in something, so we do house visits. Once that 2 weeks is up, if it's necessary.
So the Guide Dog Foundation, that's been around a lot longer. I think my notes say 1946 it was established, but there's been a tremendous evolution over time, right? So talk about that evolution and talk about some of the challenges that you're facing to keep evolving in the future.
Sure. So the organization did start back in the late 40s, derived after World War II. There was a group of 5 people, I believe, who were initially the founders of the organization to help veterans who had lost their sight due to injuries from war. And that started out in Forest Hills, Queens, and then ultimately they bought this campus, which we now have in Smithtown. And that started with one very small building and a mock-up of a city block to do the training for the guide dogs. If you were to go to our campus now, it's over 10 acres. We have a national administrative center, a dorm for our students, a training center, which at any point in time, 80 to 100 dogs could be in training, a breeding center, and a full campus, scaped out for all the different potential landscapes that could be. And we're in a very important point, in our organization's history, because the demand is there, both on the guide dog side, but especially on the vet dog side. And going back to my earlier comments, we're really looking to make a much larger impact, nationally and internationally by being able to place more teams. And the only way we could do that is by raising awareness and raising money, so that we have the money to raise one of these dogs. It's very expensive. It's over $50,000, probably closer to $60,000 to $65,000 to get a dog through the full life cycle and get it placed out in the world. And it's a very expensive proposition because it's very high touch. And while we make the most of technology, there's a lot of human high touch elements to this organization and what we're doing.
Yeah, it's incredible. I didn't realize the costs associated with it. You think a dog and
Right.
kind of move on, but that's really incredible, and it's incredible work, really truly incredible work. I mean, let's go to a little bit more of a macro conversation in terms of the not-for-profit sectors in general. Our firm represents a lot of folks who are rattling sabers with either the county or the state because of budgetary cuts, because of things that are going on. Where is that headed? Where is the not-for-profit sector as a whole headed, in your opinion?
Well, from my experience and working with you and other boards, it's it's very clear that you have to run these organizations like businesses. The bottom line is important, and you need leadership that understands how to manage a budget and balance that with service provision. And I think the organizations that will survive and thrive, as as your show here is talking about, are really those that have found that balance and understanding working the bottom line compared to first-class service provision. And you can't be everything to everybody, so you'll see less and less mission creep as we move forward. I think organizations that can collaborate and work together, that's really the future of the nonprofit industry.
Yeah, and I think collaboration is key. So we had Randy Dresner on when we were doing a show based on housing and food needs, and I was shocked that 1 in 10 Long Islanders go without food, and if Island Harvest and Long Island Cares and other great organizations didn't help provide it, they wouldn't. And she talked as well about the need for collaboration at your level with her and others. Like her. How can we help do that? How can we help form that? How can the business community help, support that?
Yeah, well, certainly, Randy is a friend, and we worked very closely together, particularly when I was with the Red Cross. But we knew each other from when I was in the food bank for New York City as well, and they do a great job, as does Paul over at the Long Island Cares. It's about convening, and you're creating the environment, the donor environment or the funding environment that requires us, to get together. I think naturally, the good organizations here on Long Island, the leaders have the proclivity to want to work together, but everybody is feeling bottom line pressures. And I think that, if funding, came in as such, where it was, requested, if not required, that would be certainly, something that would, shake the tree a little bit, and get a bigger group, starting to work together. I can tell you, since being at the Guide Dog and VetDogs, we are working with Long Island Cares. We're going to be doing a partnership with the New York Jets, where we're going to be placing a service dog, on Veterans Day or around Veterans Day, and they're going to be working with us to provide, the food and some other needs that the veteran may have, in their home. And that works. That type of model works for many reasons. Both the organizations are fulfilling their mission. We're working, in a high-profile way, to get awareness out. We're serving a need in the community, but also we're calling on each other to do what they do best. Long Island Cares does have a nice food provision, dog food or pet food provision. And it makes sense for an organization like ours to work with that. Also, we've been working with AHRC Suffolk. We've brought some puppies to their garden for the kids there to learn about dogs and how to handle them. And as we move forward, we've brought the Red Cross to the campus. And my hope is to really be a leader in that space in trying to drive collaboration. We have a big campus, with high-tech meeting room that's fully ADA compliant, and there's a hearing loop, and all the video and hearing assistance needs that any organization could have. And we encourage any organization out there to give us a call if they're interested in hosting a meeting or trying to work with us.
Yeah, that's terrific. And folks that are viewing, one of the misnomers about the not-for-profit sector is people think you're not allowed to make a profit, right? And for clarity, so everybody understands, not-for-profits, the 501c3 charitable organizations and others, the C4s and other things that are out there, the government has basically said, this is probably something, if government had the time, expertise, and resources, government should be doing. Mm-hmm. But we're going to allow the private sector to do it on behalf of government, a quasi type of agency, and we're going to allow them to be tax exempt. But they are allowed to make a profit. They're just not allowed to have their primary purpose be, to make a profit. And your statement that they have to be run like a business could never be more true than, today. One of the problems, I think, is, folks like you and folks like Randy and folks like Paul and like Neela, you're so focused on driving funds and fundraising that collaboration becomes lost, and that really puts a lot of pressure on on organizations. So now in your new role, right? What is the fundraising path look like in the past, mm-hmm. and what is your fundraising hopes for the future?
Sure. So we have to raise close to $15 million a year.
15.
15.
That's unbelievable.
To break even. Every year. We do receive, and it looks like we're going to get a small increase from a federal grant, which we're very proud to have, for our service dog, side of the house. But right now we have a full cadre of events. We have a veterans walk, we have a golf tournament, we have runs across the country. We have a very robust individual fundraising program. I think one of the biggest changes we're going to implement as I get more tenured in the position is really embracing the corporate community. I'm trying to bring the corporate community into the fold. For years and years, the organization's enjoyed a lot of grassroots donations, and I think probably more than ever it's important that we still maintain that and make sure that our grassroots donors know that how important they are to the organization and to the mission as we move forward. But I think it's equally as important, particularly with the tax law changes, that we embrace corporate giving and really try to break into some of those large-scale national organizations that would be interested in our space.
Yeah, and so from an awareness perspective, I'm a veteran. I proudly mm-hmm. served in the Marine Corps, and I think most folks, especially here on Long Island, would say, I would love to find a way to support our troops, even mm-hmm. if they weren't veterans, right? And as I, as you were coming, and honestly, I didn't even know about the organization until you joined it. I just mm-hmm. was ignorant towards it. But as I look at it, really, truly, the value proposition, I think, for supporting the organization, particularly from a business and a corporate perspective, is these men and women go overseas, okay, to defend us, to defend our way of life. They come home. There's problems with the healthcare system that they're injected into, and we know that that's been a problem. It's gotten better, but we know that that's been a problem. And I've witnessed it firsthand. I've seen veterans who have served in the Vietnam War, have served in Afghanistan, have served in Iraq. They come back, you know, and people who haven't experienced that can't understand what they're going through. So when you're saying, oh, a service dog will nudge them if they're having nightmares and everything else, you say, well, maybe a family member can do that. Right. I can tell you by my own experiences that family members don't know how to connect to that. They just don't, right? And so if you can get a service dog that can connect to that, I think that would take so much pressure off the family as well, who's trying to understand, how do I help this person who's experienced something I could never experience? Has that been feedback that you've gotten?
I got to tell you, you're right on the money, Joe. And you know,
and we never had that conversation before, right?
No, but your comments are right on point. And I can tell you, one of the first things I did when I joined the organization is I went through the class, you know, with the first service dog group, you know, that was coming to campus. And you know, there were 6 folks there, you know, 5 men, 1 woman, and they were all a little anxious, all a little nervous about, you know, what the experience was going to hold, and you know, whether this was really going to work or not. And you know, every day, you know, they warmed up a little more. And fast forward to the day after they received their dogs, they were totally different people from a personality standpoint. Whether it was the hope, or whether it was, you know, that moment that they've been waiting, you know, so long for, to know that, you know, there's a possibility to regain, you know, what their life was like. But then fast forward, you know, to the end of the training and something we call Celebration Saturday, when they graduate. And you know, family members come up from across the country. You know, they get matched and they get introduced to the people who raise their puppies, you know, their dogs as puppies. It's a full circle moment. But the thing that hit me the most, and it really struck me, I had a wife of one of the veterans come over to me, had never met me before, just knew me as being introduced, you know, as the new president. She came over, gave me a huge hug, started crying on my shoulder, and said, "Thank you for giving me my husband back." And I think that's really, you know, the impact that we have here as an organization. We're providing, you know, a quality of life, you know, for these individuals who really were at their wits' end, and really some of them have given up. And you know, it's not only, you know, the individual, but it's the family that we're serving.
Yeah, I think that that's huge, and anybody who has a relationship with anybody who served in combat understands that, you know, and maybe it's true, maybe there is just a magical way for them to connect to these service dogs because there's this unconditional bond between them. I think it's really about holding families together more so than anything. I think that that's a critical thing. Young people, right? So every organization has to be cultivating support of young people, right? 2025, the millennial generation is going to be occupying all of our workforces. So it seems like it might be a tad bit easier to attract young people when you have these beautiful puppies and dogs around, right? Than other issues. So what's been your experience? What's been the focus on getting young people engaged?
You know, the young people, you know, comprise a real component of our dog training, you know, operation. You know, we have, you know, a terrific trainer right now who's, you know, on the Today Show every day. You're really, you know, serving as part of the cast, you know, and you know, helping raise Sunny, you know, our dog, on the Today Show. And I think she's a great model for all that we're doing. But we have an apprentice program where we're trying to really work hard with millennials, and they're some of the best trainers, you know, that we have in the organization. And you know, my philosophy has always been, you know, I had people, you know, who invested in me and took a chance on me very early, you know, in my career, whether it's, you know, with the town of Babylon or, you know, at the Red Cross, you know, and the president of the Red Cross. And you know, we're going to continue to focus, you know, on building our talent pool in the millennials. You know, the millennials that we have here now at, you know, Guide Dog and VetDogs, you know, really are second to none, and we're going to continue to invest in them.
Yeah, I hear so many business people want to, you know, dump all over the millennials. My experience has been they've been a phenomenal addition, particularly to our workforce. It's no different than any other talent pool. You have to sort through them and find good, talented folks. Right. So what's a way young people can engage in your organization? Are there ways they can?
Absolutely. You know, either, you know, through volunteering, puppy raising. You know, we have colleges, you know, that are raising puppies. You know, we have companies, you know, that are, you know, helping to raise puppies. volunteering. Ultimately, if you're looking, for a full-time job, we do have an apprentice program to get people into dog training and, get certified by, our accreditors, as well as, fundraising. And we have a speakers bureau where we have, some of our young folks go out and, talk about, what it means to raise a puppy and to watch the impact, that we're talking about that it has on families.
So just going back for a minute, you said that the waiting list and the demand for guide dogs is growing. Why do you think that is? Is it just because of a population explosion? Is there a metric of, one dog per certain head count in the population is needed? How does that work?
Well, we're finding that people are, losing vision or having their vision impaired by, as they age, whether it's diabetes or other potential ailments. But just to clarify, so our list, for guide dogs has been pretty steady, over the last.
It's the vet
few
dogs
years.
that are.
It's the vet dog side that really is kind of exploding.
Yeah. So. Corporate responsibility, right? So you got about 15,000 business owners and business people that are going to be accessing this video and watching it at some point. So 5,000 to 6,000 organizations. Why you? Why your organization? Why is the Guide Dog and the American Vet Dog the organization they should be taking on as a corporate sponsor?
Because if you look at the difference we're making in lives, we're giving people, their husband or wife back. We're giving them a fair shot of living a normal life after having gone through such significant, in many cases, trauma, over in the battlefield. But also, the empowerment, on the guide dog side, for somebody who has not been able, to leave the home or not comfortably, go forward. We had a young man from Bethpage who was a football player, built like a He-Man, and ultimately was commuting from Bethpage to New York City every day over by Columbia University. So that's it's a pretty big commute.
Yeah.
And didn't have a guide dog, and he was resistant, for many reasons. But one day, coming home after working late, he walked into a telephone pole that had a nail exposed, and cut his head open, and it really almost took out one of his eyes. As best I understand the story, and it was a low moment for him, and he came to our organization, was somewhat reluctant, but once again, you saw the joy and the empowerment once he was paired with his dog and learned how to work with it and handle the dog. And we changed lives, and you could see it instantaneously. And I'll be honest with you, I was surprised about how instantaneous it was. And watching some of these folks in their personalities transform, it's real, and it makes a huge impact. And not only that, we are rated very highly by all of the rating agencies we've spoke to before, and we're always going to do things ethically and morally right.
Yep. So folks, we were joined today with John Miller, President and CEO of the American Guide Dog Foundation, American Vet Dogs. Folks, you enjoy your liberty, you enjoy your freedom because vets are out there fighting for us. This is a really easy way to help support them and give back. John, real quick, give folks a way to get in contact with you so they can write their checks.
Sure. You can go to guidedog.org, guidedog.org, or vetdogs.org. And you can reach out, write your check, volunteer, or stop by our Smith County campus and right there and say hi.
Great. And I encourage everyone to give to this great organization. Thanks so much, John, for taking on this undertaking.
Thanks for having us, Joe.
Absolutely.
I spent a lot of time trying to stay on duty, stay in the Army. I made a lot of bad decisions during that time to cover up issues such as PTSD, to do my best to hide the physical injuries that were going on so I could stay fit for duty, and ultimately realized that not only was I having all these physical and mental issues, I was cutting off the people in my life. I was withdrawing. My name is Peter Way, and I am a retired Army major from Augusta, Georgia.
Being honest, I was working full-time. We had 2 teenage children. I was just trying to hold our family together. I was trying to make things normal and positive, but it was very difficult. You were isolating yourself, you were grumpy, you were angry, you were reclusive. We were sort of in a coping phase of life.
I remember when I came into the airport, I was doped up, because that was the only way I could fly, was to, to get heavy amounts of something for anxiety. We got to campus and I walked through that front door, and it was just the weirdest feeling, because it was like this wave of, that's the atmosphere here. It's like this vibe that can't put that into words. We always had an opportunity to tell our dog trainers things that we needed to experience before leaving. One of mine in particular was Walmart, and we made a field trip to Walmart one day, and I went into a Walmart for the first time during daylight hours. And because of those experiences, within a week of getting home, I took my daughter to the mall for the first time in years, took her shopping.
I just underestimated the impact until Pete got home, and I just saw how Pete had changed. I didn't have any preconceived notions. I just was relieved and happy to see this Pete. It's an amazing gift to all of us. I have my old husband back. Getting Rory was a turning point in our relationship, in our marriage, and definitely for Pete.
I had accepted certain things and had accepted it as this is just how it is, and I almost got comfortable in the misery of it. You don't realize how bad and how dark and how things really were until you can really truly step out of it, look back on it, and say that was bad. That was just a road that was never going to end well. Rory was that fork in the road. This way is not going to be good. This way is a new life. I have to thank VetDogs for that.
Currently, we provide a 2-week class experience for our applicants. Lots of our clients have busy work, school, family lives. So we really wanted to make sure that these people could come in and get the same kind of high quality program as they could receive in a 4-week program, but in a more compressed time. So typically in the guide dog industry, you might have 4 to 6 students per instructor. For us, it's 2 to 1. That gives us an ability to really customize each person's experience, so that at the end of it, we've been able to achieve their goals that they gave us at the beginning when they embarked on the journey. With a 2 to 1 ratio, you're actually observing more interactions between each client and each dog on a daily basis, which means you can identify challenges that come up, you can address them more quickly than you ever could in a much longer program. When students arrive, and of course we train clients from all around the United States and Canada, and when they arrive and they come in from one of the airports in the New York metro area, they come into our gorgeous campus where we're able to fulfill all their needs while they're with us for the 2 weeks of the training with their guide dog. We want it to be a home away from home. We have private rooms, we have private baths for each of our students, we have Wi-Fi connectivity, we have a chef that provides amazing meals and can accommodate any dietary restriction that somebody might have. The first day is getting to know their classmates and everybody kind of talking a little bit about their background and what they're hoping to achieve here during their training. So the first day is spent orienting to the building, kind of learning the schedule, learning what the next 2 weeks is going to look like. And then that second afternoon that they've arrived, they get matched with their dog. From that point, the person is going to be with their dog 24/7. The dog stays with them, sleeps with them. Every need that needs to be attended to for the dog is taken care of by the client for the next 2 weeks. At that point then, what we're focused on is building fundamentals. We have a wide range of clients that we provide service for, from people who live in rural areas to people who might live in the middle of Manhattan or other large urban areas. So in the second week, we're able to customize with our 2 to 1 ratio where everybody is going. So they can get a mix and match of whatever they want. They can get hiking trails, they can get pathways, they can get city work, they can get rural work, sidewalkless areas. They can go into the city and experience subway and other urban travel. So from a standpoint of where we're located in the New York metro area on Long Island, we can satisfy any need that they possibly would have in that 2-week period. One of the things that makes us unique is that we have full-time field support that can provide graduate support when they have issues, whether that be an issue that they're having around how their dog is working, whether it be an accessibility issue, whatever it might be, we have field support that is out in their zone, ready to handle their problem.
So welcome back to CMM Live. It is Tuesday, May 15th, and as I promised you, today we were going to have the rock stars of the not-for-profit world on, and our second rock star in our segment is Ken Cerini, the managing partner of Cerini Associates and the founder of the Long Island Imagine Awards. Now, I do want to tell you guys that Ken and I have been friends for a long time, and I will share very publicly that it was a little over 10 years ago, Ken, when I was looking for a space to try and grow the firm. And I'll tell you, Ken was one of the greatest friends and partners to our law firm. He helped us out. He housed us. He really, because we were a not-for-profit at that time as well. He really did a terrific job. And there is no better philanthropic person, both professionally and personally from his heart, than my good friend Ken Cerini. And I have to tell you that, you know, I haven't met an accountant yet in the state who knows this sector better than you, who's watched it grow and who's cultivated it growing. So we got a lot to talk about, you know, with a little bit of time. So let's start at the beginning, which is why the not-for-profit sector? How did you morph into that? How did you stick with that, and how did you grow that? Where's your passion lie there?
Well, first of all, Joe, thanks for having me on the show. And in terms of how I got into the nonprofit sector, I started my career with Ernst & Young. And working with Ernst & Young, I got to work on many different types of clients. I did nonprofit type clients in terms of healthcare, and I also worked on for-profits, large corporations, publicly traded companies. And I always felt I had that affinity more with the nonprofit sector. It kind of resonated more with my personality than the for-profit sector. When I worked in the for-profit sector, I almost kind of felt at times it was a necessary evil, the work that we did for them. You know, they had us do it because we had to do it for them. In the nonprofit sector, there was more of an appreciation. They actually were thankful of the work we did. And that kind of translates now into the work I do, which is kind of more full spectrum for what we do for the nonprofit sector. We don't just kind of approach things the way the traditional accountant does. As you said, we know the sector, we work hard in the sector, we stay in tune with everything that's happening within the sector, whether it be, again, the traditional accounting type stuff, as well as things like fundraising and business cultivation and how organizations can grow their operations, how they can be more effective as a nonprofit organization, what they can do from a reimbursement perspective, what's happening with the regulations that are impacting them. And we kind of look at our role now as educators. So part of what we do is we educate the sector. We help them to do their business better, because we feel that if we can help them from a back office perspective do the thing that they do better and help them be more effective and more efficient, that will give them more resources and more tools to be able to go out and serve the people they serve. So I kind of feel, and maybe it's a little selfish of me, but I kind of feel like me doing my job well helps to ensure that they do their job well, which means more benefit to the community where it's definitely needed.
Yeah, and you certainly do your job extraordinarily well. One of the things that I'm always impressed of when I'm in your office is the amazing, you know, not just a powerhouse accounting firm that you've built, and it is a powerhouse, but the culture, right? The culture that you have within your walls, who really are very zealous in this space. They really care about their clients. They really care about what's going on. It's not typical accounting culture. So talk about how you've, over these years, built that firm and that culture.
I think first of all, when you talk about culture, I think we have the same culture whether it's a nonprofit or for-profit. I mean, we kind of work across all spectrums. But again, my part of the practice is the nonprofit part of the practice, so I'll kind of talk from that perspective. Again, you know, I find that when you go out and you look at, and not to say anything negative about other accounting firms, because I think, again, everybody does a great job in what they do, but I think you have to really own an industry, or you have to own the sector that you're working in if you're going to be a valuable client a valuable resource, to your clients. So I think a lot of that comes from the fact that we get heavily involved in the sector. We get heavily involved in helping our clients in many different ways. We get involved in all different trade associations that our nonprofits get involved in. We read the same materials that they're reading, because how can you be a resource to your clients if they know more than you? So we feel we have to know at least as much of that as they do, if not more. On top of that, again, it's not just about the work you do for a client, it's the attitude, it's the intangibles you bring to the table, it's understanding what makes them tick. It's understanding the fact that the nonprofit sector typically has a lot less resources than the for-profit sector does. They're working with larger constraints than the for-profit sector does. Think about it a second. If a publicly traded company doesn't hit its numbers, what happens? Someone doesn't get a dividend. In the nonprofit sector, if a nonprofit doesn't have the funds that it needs, what happens? Someone goes hungry, someone goes homeless. There's a very much more at stake in the nonprofit sector. So we feel that if we're going to be involved in that sector, we have to get it right, because we have to help them get it right, because it means lives and it means impact.
Yep, that's a great point. And just to clarify, because I think you raise a fair point, your accounting firm is full service. There's tax and for-profit audit as well. Being our segment today is on not-for-profits, we're focused on that, but I want folks to understand that it is not just a not-for-profit accounting firm. It just happens to be where your expertise is.
It's a lot more fun on the nonprofit side.
And I sense that. I sense that you guys have a really good time when I'm in there. But what are the challenges? So we were just talking to John Miller. Government is cutting back across the board. Even at our firm, there's a lot of cuts at the county level. There's a lot of cuts at the state level. The controller's office is squeezing a lot of folks and agencies. What are the challenges you see that are happening now in your clients?
We're almost like at this, and you've probably heard this said many times, we're at this perfect storm in the nonprofit sector. You're in a situation where at the federal level, there are clearly going to be some level of cutbacks at the federal level. If they go to block grants for Medicaid, that's going to have a big impact on New York State, which is the largest receiver of Medicaid funds in the country. So there'll be an impact there. The changes in the regulations that have been put in place in the state budget have really not provided a lot of large benefit for the nonprofit sector. You have changes in the tax laws, and the changes in the tax laws have disincentivized giving to the nonprofit sector between lower tax brackets and less ability to take itemized deductions. That's all having an impact on, and also increasing the estate tax rules or levels. That's all having an impact on the nonprofit sector and the ability for the nonprofit sector to draw funds. The sector has gotten a lot more competitive, but that doesn't mean the sector shouldn't also come together in a collaborative way, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in a little while. But there's a lot of challenges, regulatory challenges, not just from a funding perspective and the different funding sources, but also what's happening from an HR perspective and some of the regulations from an employee benefits perspective. And it almost feels like death by 1,000 paper cuts these days in the nonprofit sector, where every time a new regulation gets passed, there's a squeeze on the administrative spending with Executive Order 38. There's a squeeze on how nonprofits do business and the funds that they get. The government gives with one hand and takes back with the other, because it's no longer a matter of when if a nonprofit's going to get audited. It's a matter of when they're going to get audited, and a lot of that comes with take back of funds. So it's really been a challenging marketplace, and I think what you're going to see down the road, they're going to have to see an increase in collaboration within the sector. The sector is going to have to work more closely together. There's going to have to be more alignment, both vertically and horizontally, within the sector. You're going to see more mergers and acquisitions happening in the nonprofit sector because the smaller organizations are just going to have a tougher time. Anybody who right now is working in a healthcare world where you're dealing with the increase in managed care, you just can't compete in managed care arena if you're small. You have to have a certain level of size behind you. So there has to be some level of consolidation or collaboration. And when we talk about consolidation, it could just be really consolidating back office functions and organizations continue to work autonomously. But there has to be a change in how the sector functions. The sector can't work the same way it's worked for the last 50 years, can't work with a lot of independent organizations. There needs to be organizations coming together. There's too much overlap in the sector.
Yeah, and that's so the whole guise of our show here is to take folks who not only are aware of the challenges but have found creative ways to address the challenges and have shown leadership in addressing the challenges. And I think collaboration is key. And I think one of the largest collaborative tools that we have here on Long Island is the Imagine Awards, okay? And the Imagine Awards, to me, and I've watched them mature and progress since inception with awe. I find them to be one of the top 5 events that happens across here on Long Island.
I really appreciate that.
It's really how I feel. The impact is incredible. The mission is incredible. And your messaging is always about getting them all together in a room for awareness and collaboration, because you see the sector changing and everything else. So talk about that whole process, that whole, from inception of idea to the maturity that it is now.
Well, the Imagine Awards from a concept perspective have been around for about 15 years. I mean, it's something that I've wanted to do for a long time before it actually got underway. It really was a situation where you think about the nonprofit sector and you think about all the good things that the sector does for Long Island. Everybody who lives, works, or plays here, visits Long Island, they're all in some way, shape, or form touched by a nonprofit organization. And for 365 days a year, the nonprofit sector works really, really hard to make Long Island a better place to live, whether it be culturally, whether it be through health and wellness, whether it be through education, whatever the portion of the nonprofit sector. So there really needed to be a night where the nonprofit sector could kind of sit back and self-reflect and focus on itself. Let's pull away from all the focusing on others, and let's shine the spotlight on the nonprofit sector. And that really was the impetus that started the Imagine Awards. How do we get a night that's really geared towards the nonprofit sector where we could bring together some of the best nonprofit organizations in a way that excuse me, in a way that the sector could thrive, the sector could show really what makes it different, what makes it special. So that was one of the reasons why the Imagine Awards came into play. The second was there's so many really cool ideas out there and so many organizations, and a lot of the organizations don't know each other. They don't communicate, they don't talk, they don't understand who else is out there doing what they do, whether it's in their marketplace or in an aligned marketplace. So the Imagine Awards also provided a venue for collaboration, as you said, where organizations can come together, and there's over 400 people in the room, again, talking about nonprofit type issues and nonprofit type items, which is great. On top of that, there are 20 finalists, and each of the 20 finalists are there for a reason. These are some of the best nonprofit organizations on Long Island. And those 20 finalists have videos, and those videos kind of key in on some of the things that make them innovative, that make them impactful. And it's those videos then that also provide additional insight into what these organizations are doing. So, with the videos, the videos provide that education component, the collaboration of being in a room and having organizations getting to meet each other for the first time and getting to see what each of the organizations do. And again, the focus on almost like an Academy Award type night where nonprofits get recognized for the good things that they're doing, and they get bragging rights for a year, plus a check for $5,000 and a video and trophy and everything else. It's a really cool night.
Yeah, it's tremendous. I served as a judge this past year, and the one thing that
So you almost got it perfect this year.
I almost got it perfect, but I'll tell you, I thought I had a pretty good finger on the pulse of the Long Island not-for-profit community. When you look at the enormous amount of applications of just eminently qualified agencies and not-for-profit entities, it's so hard to come down and pick those winners. Sorry,
1 second. But the funny thing is, if you ask somebody how many nonprofits there are on Long Island, it's a tough question to answer, because I don't know. I mean, there's clearly over 3,000 nonprofit organizations, but is it 3,000? Is it 4? Is it 5?
Yeah.
You know, it's a really tough thing to really understand the scope of the sector. And so many of them are small nonprofits generating under $1 million worth of revenue. But again, they all need our help.
Yeah, and it's true, because sometimes I hear there's 5,000, sometimes I hear there's 6,000, sometimes I hear there's 3,000. And one of the things that I think the Imagine Award serves as well for the business community is almost like a vetting, because where do you turn your time? Where do you turn your dollars? How do you find organizations that are reputable? You know, the Imagine Awards has helped highlight those, because they go through such a process of being nominated and then people going through the application and judges and everybody else. It really helps highlight organizations that you can feel comfortable devoting time and dollars to. And that's a big question that, you know, the business community has, Ken, and maybe you can talk about it, is, you know, what are the good organizations? How do I find them? How do I know if an organization is good? What should I be looking at before I put time and dollars into an organization? How do you feel when you look at an organization that way?
There are a lot of organizations out there. Some of them are effective, some of them are ineffective. You know, I think you have to take the time to go through the information that's available. And there's a lot of information available on nonprofits. You can go to the New York State a lot of people go to GuideStar.
Yep.
And GuideStar is a nonprofit kind of place where all of the 990s are. But I actually, if it's a New York-based nonprofit organization, if you go to the Charities Bureau and you download the 990 from the Charities Bureau, I like that better, because you also get a copy of the financial statement that was filed with the 990. So you get both the 990 and the financial statements, which I think gives you a little more insight into the organization. But again, when I'm looking at a nonprofit organization, I'm looking at what's the message that the nonprofit organization is giving off on their website. How does the organization measure impact? You know, because when you think of impact, you think of impact both on a micro level and a macro level. Mm-hmm. Micro level being what's the impact that they're having on the consumers and the people that they work with, and the macro level is what's the impact they're having on the economy that or the community that they serve. So I kind of like to look at both of them, and you know, one of the biggest challenges that the sector is facing right now is how do you measure impact? And that's kind of a key thing that the sector is kind of looking into on a regular basis and trying to determine, you know, what's the best way to measure that impact. So if I have an organization that can really do a good job of defining their impact, defining their leverage, so what sort of leverage do they have? If I give $1 to the organization, so you know, take an organization like you know, Randy Dresner has, you know, has Island Harvest. You know, Island Harvest collects a lot of food, but they also collect some money. But if you take the small amount of money that Island Harvest brings in, and you look at the impact they have in terms of how many meals they serve based on the food deliveries and their ability to keep food out of you know, being thrown away and everything else, the impact they have is tremendous compared to the dollars that they actually bring in. So, you know, if you can look at leverage, you can look at impact, look at how they're spending their money. You know, organizations have to disclose how much is going towards program, how much is going towards fundraising, and how much is going towards administration. Not that administration is a bad thing, but you really want to work with an organization that's going to be strong in terms of their program accomplishments and their program spending. So there is information out there that you can kind of use as a guide to kind of help you through that path as to which of the nonprofit organizations are maybe the best ones to fund.
Yeah, so one of the challenges I'm sure that you face on the accounting firm side is, you know, not-for-profits have to be audited every year. It's such a competitive space right now for service providers and accountants to want to get in there. So I'm sure there's a lot of price wars that go on in there. But you've managed to grow, and you've managed to gain more accounts over the years and continue to grow. You know, what have you done? What have you done with your accounting practice to make sure that you guys have remained competitive from a pricing perspective, but added value to all these accounts?
From a dollars perspective, start there. I mean, we're not going to necessarily always be the cheapest. We're clearly not going to be the most expensive. We typically run somewhere around the middle of the pack. It really comes down to, you know, what do you deliver on? And if you're going to be working in the nonprofit sector, remember the nonprofit sector is going to be, in a lot of instances, very needy in terms of they need information, they need advice, they need hand-holding in certain respects. They need, you know, guidance. They're looking for someone who's going to help them, not just from an accounting perspective, but someone who can answer a myriad of questions about a whole bunch of different topics. They're looking for someone who understands compliance because they have to deal with compliance issues on a regular basis. They're looking for someone who can understand regulations. So when we go in and we do an audit, we don't just focus on the fiscal aspects of things. We look at fiscal, we look at compliance, we look at operations, we look at how effective they're doing, and we use a whole bunch of different analytics to look at the operational effectiveness of the organizations. We try to educate them on what they can be doing better. We work with their boards of directors and try to educate their boards of directors. So we really take a holistic approach when we're dealing with the nonprofit sector. We really focus on value. And I know everybody talks about value, and that's a word that gets tossed around on a regular basis. But we've told many clients, look, if you don't get the value that we say you're going to get, we won't charge you full price and just get rid of us. And they don't, because we do deliver on value. We do deliver on responsiveness. We do deliver on all of those things because, honestly, as I said before, there's too much riding on it if we get it wrong. If we get it wrong and a nonprofit organization has to give money back to a governmental agency, that means, again, someone doesn't get an education, someone doesn't get fed, someone doesn't get housed. There's too much riding on it. We can't make mistakes. So we really take what we do very seriously, and we over-deliver.
Yeah, and you do a terrific job. I mean, just dealing with boards, and I serve on several not-for-profit boards, and boards are tough. Everybody knows accountants. Everybody thinks there's many accountants on boards. You got to have a lot of people looking over your shoulders and sort of questioning and giving you a lot of, of their own take on things.
I think, though, if everybody's really focused on the mission of the organization, and everybody's focused on what the organization is trying to accomplish, and everybody's focused on the direction the organization is moving in, and we all work collaboratively, and I know I've tossed that word around a lot, but if we all work collaboratively, we as the accountant, the organization, the board, everybody works towards a common goal, and everybody's really focused on how to make this organization better, stronger, faster. It feels like the $6 million organization.
Right.
How do we go about doing this in a way that's really going to be meaningful and helpful? And I think if we can do those sorts of things, then people aren't necessarily looking over your shoulder anymore. People are really kind of standing face to face with you in terms of trying to help develop plans and looking for some help in terms of what direction the organization needs to move in.
Yeah, and I think that's great advice. Let's talk about young people. So, we're going to need to be...
How young?
Young millennials.
Okay.
We're going to need to be finding jobs. We're almost at full employment here on Long Island right now. We have a workforce coming out of the universities in droves. Okay, what about the not-for-profit sector is going to attract them? I mean, salaries typically are not as high as the for-profit sector. So what can not-for-profits be doing, and what are they doing to be able to attract top talent coming out of schools at this point?
Well, I mean, I think let's take a step back. I mean, I think the millennials are very different from you and I. When we went through high school and college and everything else, there really wasn't an emphasis on getting involved. There really wasn't an emphasis on donating your time and everything else. We did it, I did it because, I mean, that's what my family did. But it stemmed from your family and your family values. It didn't necessarily stem from the community or stem from school and everything else. I think in today's environment, there's much more of an emphasis at the school level, at the college level, about getting it on your resume and making sure you have those community service hours and everything else. So I think there's a larger introduction at earlier ages now to the nonprofit sector and to doing good. And I think that's very, very helpful because I find that the millennials tend to be much more social conscious than the older generations. So the millennials want to get more involved. They want to make a difference. If you look at how they spend, when they buy things sometimes just because there's money going to charity, based on that purchase. So there's much more of a connection, I think, to the nonprofit sector and to having a social impact in the millennials than I find in other generations that happened prior to them. So I think the nonprofit sector already has a leg up because I think you're finding more social entrepreneurism happening within the millennial population. They truly do want to do more social good than in the past.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, so I think you're in a situation where, when you look at the millennials and what nonprofit organizations can do. Again, I think they need to show opportunity. I think they need to try to get the millennials engaged in what they're doing, and millennials love engagement. So if you can get the millennials engaged in the organization and engaged in the organization's mission, and let them see how their efforts are having an impact on people, on lives, on the community, on the environment and everything else, I think that goes a long way. And a lot of times it's not necessarily all about the money. It's about that engagement and the, again, that psychic benefit that comes from working for a nonprofit organization. That's helpful.
Yeah, well, at some point they are going to need to make money. I mean, how are you dealing with it on the accounting firm side? So for us as a law firm out here in Suffolk County, it's challenging. It's challenging to attract talent. There are, folks want to be in the city, or they want to be in, downtown Brooklyn or areas where it's trendy. I think a lot's happening on Long Island to try and help that. But how are you guys, addressing, attracting millennials and even younger talent at this point, past millennials, to make sure that your workforce remains robust?
I think what we've done is we've been very successful in our internship programs. We get the students early on, and we show them that public accounting is not what they heard about in public accounting. Everybody, you hear about public accounting, you think long hours, lots of work, getting beaten up, partners are put up on this pedestal and everything else. Clearly, nobody puts me on a pedestal. So, we're in a situation where, it really is a different type of an accounting firm. We're a little quirky, we're a little strange, we're a little different. And I think that all kind of helps because people feel like they're part of this kind of weird family. Maybe it's the Addams family at times, but they feel like they're part of this weird family. And, I think that helps to kind of marry people to our firm. And, we've had very low turnover because of it. So, we've been very, very successful in terms of bringing in those interns, bringing in some of the top students who really are looking for that alternative way of doing things. And also, and you said, how can the nonprofit sector attract younger talent? Well, we kind of use that in terms of helping to attract the younger talent because, again, as I said, millennials want to make a difference.
Yep.
So we're sitting here telling them, you come work for us. You're not going to be doing work for these major corporations. You're going to be doing work for these nonprofit organizations, the people who need you, the people who are going to appreciate you, the people who are going to thank you when you're done with the audit and thank you when you're done with your work, people who are going to allow you to use your talent and your skills and who are going to listen to you, and your voice is going to matter.
Yeah,
and that's a powerful message.
Yeah, that's really a great message. Last question I have is fundraising, right? So the pressures that these CEOs have of these not-for-profits in terms of having to raise corporate funds because of the challenges with government funds. Where do you see that? Do you see corporations, because you see the dollars that come in, are corporations being more helpful right now? Are they being less helpful? How can these organizations engage companies more robustly?
There's a lot of components to that question you asked. I mean, right now, and as traditionally it's been, more dollars come from individuals than come from any other part of the sector. So individuals account for over 70% of all contributions made to nonprofit organizations. So, individuals are still the key component. You've got private foundations, you've got corporations and everything else, but it's still more comes from individuals. You're dealing with government cutbacks. There's been a lot more competition for dollars. So because there's been a lot more competition for dollars, it's harder for organizations to kind of get their voice up there. They have to find ways through social media and other ways to kind of get above the crowd and above the noise so people know who they are and understand their message. The world has also gotten much smaller. So we're hearing a lot more about things that are happening in other parts of the world. So dollars don't necessarily stay local, Dollars tend to kind of move to wherever the next catastrophe occurs. So dollars, go to Puerto Rico, go to, different parts of the country and different parts of the world, which means that the local nonprofit organizations are having a tougher time because those dollars aren't necessarily here because people are much more knowledgeable about what's happening around the world and much more in tune to kind of making a difference. So it really becomes a much bigger challenge for the nonprofit sector. And they have to find more creative ways to go out and fundraise, whether that's fundraising for not dollars, but for supplies that they're going to need, whether it's coming up with interesting ways of fundraising, whether it's, and to be honest, people give for three reasons. People give because they have an affinity to an organization. The organizations help them in some way, shape, or form, or help the family member. An organization, people give to an organization because they believe in the cause of the organization. So, I believe in homelessness, or I believe in feeding people, so I believe in the cause, so I give for that. Or people give because somebody they know and someone they like asked them to give.
Right, that's great. We're out of time, unfortunately, folks. It's been really a pleasure to have the guru of not-for-profits here, right here in our own backyard on Long Island. A wealth of information. Ken, people want to get in touch with you. What's the best way to contact you?
They can go right to our website, CeriniAssociates.com, or they can reach out to me. Our number is 631-582-1600. I'm extension 203. I'll talk to anyone.
Yep, the best resource, folks, for not-for-profits and for-profit companies right here at Cerini Associates. Thanks for joining us this week, everyone. Hopefully you enjoyed the show as much as I did, and we'll see you next week.